Plains Angels is an initiative of the Greater Des Moines Partnership that connects Iowa-based angel investors with early-stage growth companies throughout the Midwest.
I think next up we have Drew and Darian talking about negotiations, which is one of my favorite topics. So, gentlemen, please come up.
All right. Well, I spoke a little bit earlier, so I gave you a bit of my background, but Drew is actually my attorney, so it'll be fun to talk about the negotiations that we've had.
We're going to find out just how much we disagree on everything now.
No, so I don't know if you want to give me background.
So, yet another attorney here at Brown Winnick, primarily do corporate work, and about a third of my practice is estate planning and tax. I was a tax accountant when I was going to before law school, so I like spreadsheets. That pretty much is why I do all that stuff. So, but yeah, I love, my passion is really working with people, entrepreneurs, manufacturers, startups, that kind of stuff. So, like Darian mentioned, we've worked together on negotiating a few contracts now over the last 3 years or so. And I guess, we met a few days ago and it's like, well, what do you say about negotiation? Well, in some ways it's personal, right? It is personal, but there's some pretty key things. My worry is that this will be a little obvious, but we'll hopefully throw some anecdotes and stories in that will be more entertaining. But I'm amazed at how many people don't do step one. Like when you're negotiating anything, you're asking for something, like know what you want. Now I realize sometimes you don't know what's reasonable, you don't know what the scope is, but try to the extent possible to have an idea of what the outcome or objective you have when you start negotiating something. It makes it a lot easier to hit a target if you have a target in mind, right? And second of all, know what the other party's doing. They have the same situation, right? You're trying to get someone to agree to something with you. Have an idea of what they're looking for. It doesn't mean you're going to give them everything they want, but if you can get a good idea of what their motivations are, right, it makes things a lot easier. First of all, you're going to start off a lot closer to where an agreement's going to end up, most likely. You're not going to waste your time on arguing about a lot of stuff that doesn't matter. And so those are pretty early things. And I'll let you talk a little bit about external pressures. But
yeah, sure. When you have a company, you're like always losing money. That's just the reality of what you're up against, right? And so you're raising money because you're not profitable yet. You're not really cash flowing. You're raising money to prove out your concept and do these things. And you're always losing money. And so the idea behind being desperate is like, realize what your limitations are and what you can negotiate and what you can't, right? Like, is your company really worth $10 million or do you need money next month? And so if you were to make me an offer today, it might be worth $2.5 million, right? I might be willing to take a hit or a lesser valuation in order to expedite what that fundraising process is going to look like.
And it's also relevant to note, if you're thinking that you're going to need capital, cash flow analysis, try to start negotiating before you become desperate for that reason, right? That doesn't mean, there's always this tension. Do you raise a whole, I have a lot of people come in and they're like, well, I know to get fully launched, fully profitable, it's going to take $4 million. And they have the idea, maybe they've got a provision plan. They don't have it yet, right? Well, like $4 million right now is, you're not going to be able to raise, most likely, right? But so understand, like, you need to raise enough to give you enough runway to get to the key milestones and also have enough time to maybe raise that next round of capital that you're going to need to go to the next level. But you don't want to get, well, I kept it real close, if everything goes right, I'll have just enough. I'll run out of money the day I get my minimum viable product launch and get my first customer. But what are you going to do then? You're still in a desperate position on that day because, first of all, you did not hit your budget. Sorry, unless you guys are miracle workers, you didn't hit your budget, especially on development costs. That never quite works out the way you hope. But try not to put yourself in a desperate position. That's it.
I think we've hit on this a couple of times today about don't raise more than you actually need. You'll get what it's expensive. You'll run into some problems with just the fact that you could be left with only 2% of your company at some point down the road if you give away too much too early. But we've had offers that we've just had to walk away from where we were raising $500,000 and we already had $400,000, and out of nowhere 2 others came in. They both each wanted to give $400,000, so I wasn't gonna take a $1,200 investment on a $500,000 round because I would have more than doubled the amount of equity I was going to put out. So yeah, don't get me wrong, I would have loved to have like the 1.2 million extra in the bank account, but it comes with a price. And so I think, if anything, try to set it up to where, all right, this money's gonna last me how long based on these certain milestones. And it may be the case where you can approach an investor who wants to give you more money and say, hey, if we do reach these milestones, then let's talk, and you can have sort of this idea of meet some successes along the way before you know, because if you do reach those milestones, then the value of your company is also going up.
And you guys have probably already talked about this, but you know, if you're the founder, I'm often representing founders. I represent some investors, but it's more often the company, right? And the founder starts out at 100%. It never goes up from there. You can't, right? And every round you're going to go down. Now, you do that for a reason. It's strategic, but there is a limit to how far you're likely willing to go down, and you want to be very aware of that. Now, again, circumstances drive a lot of those decisions, but it's something to be very aware of. You're not going to go back up absent some special circumstances. They're pretty rare. Okay.
All right, so do your homework on your investors. We've talked about this a little bit, but I want to give you a real practical sort of nightmare story for me personally. And hopefully this helps play out why you want to do homework on your investors. So earlier I mentioned I took on an investor that really became a micromanager for me, but some things within that, if I could go back and do it differently, is I would have done a little bit more homework before I married the investor. And what that would have looked like for me is that if you're taking an investor that has any level of legitimate experience, then they probably have invested in hopefully more than just you, right? They're seasoned, they've got a diverse number of companies that they've invested in, and I would encourage you to speak to the other founders and companies that they've invested in. And not only that, but because the success rate of startups is not that high, 90% of startups fail, and so I specifically even want to talk to the ones that didn't make it, and I want to know, how did this investor support you or work with you alongside that process of it not working out? Were they an a-hole, or like were they helpful along the way? Were they in it with you until the end? Did they explore every option with you to try to make this successful? Or what happened? Because I know now in hindsight that that would have saved me a lot of heartache along the way. Now, fortunately for me, call it dumb luck if you will, but because of the accelerator I went into, they basically required us to incorporate in the state of Delaware, which has certain investor advantages. And I haven't read up on it to even know what they are, but it was like, if that's what it takes for me to get to your accelerator and you're going to guarantee me $70,000, okay, I'll incorporate in Delaware, right? But on the back end, where it ended up helping me is that this particular investor became the chairman of my board. He was my lead investor, and when things got really rough, I wanted him out. Like it was too much to bear. I was on anxiety meds. Like it was really bad, and we just had two completely different directions that we wanted to take the company. And so, essentially, what I was able to do because we were incorporated in Delaware is I was able to put to a shareholder vote more than 51% vote to vote him off of the board. Had I incorporated in Iowa, I would have needed 90% of my shareholder votes, and this investor owned more than 10% of the company, and it would have never happened, right? And so, for me, it worked out to be incorporated in Delaware in that particular instance where I was able to maintain a level of ownership alongside other shareholders to execute on that type of a thing. There's plenty of other what-ifs and examples of where that might come into play, but...
And I'll say, so, just so you know, there are ways to do that in Iowa with a lower percentage. 90% is pretty high. But that being said, Darren's right. Like, the way we structure things, and this is a good example, giving away a board seat up front for an investor, right? And when I say this, it makes it sound like we don't like investors. No, 95% of the investors my clients bring in are extremely helpful and valuable parts, not only the cash, but they add a lot of other value. But sometimes it just doesn't fit. And in Darren's case, I always joke, there's a difference between identifying problems, right? That's fine. We want people involved that identify risks and are really smart about that. Hopefully then they help you find solutions. That's a good board member. Not just, I hate your problems, and maybe I hate you because you have problems. Not exactly helpful in driving a company. So that's a piece you want to think about. And the reason we were able to get rid of him partially too is we didn't commit to giving him a board seat. When he was investing, we said, you know, yeah, we'll vote to put you on the board, but we're not going to make a written commitment that you are entitled to a board seat. And like, it's sort of the difference between may and shall, right? Sometimes one word makes a big difference. In those cases, we made our commitment. We appointed that person to the board. But when it didn't work out after a year, we hadn't committed that he was entitled to that particular board seat. And I think it would be a very different situation today if we had.
Yeah, I think the other part of it is, I remember what it's like to not have any investors. I remember being so frustrated because I had my full-time job. I was packing boxes at like 2 in the morning in my living room when my kids were sleeping, and I had like 5 customers a month. And I remember like, is anybody ever going to find out that I'm even doing this? Like, I live in a random house in Carlisle, Iowa, sending boxes to guys in New York City. Is anybody ever going to really give me money to fund this idea? And I think you have to see past that a little bit. Like, just believe in yourself to know, like, eventually if you keep following that and you're getting a return, you're proving your concept, that word will get out and the right people will get introduced to you, and certain things happen. You have to put yourself into things like this and network and go to 1 million cups or pitch and grow events or what have you. But the challenge is that then it becomes sort of this idea of like, well, all money is green and I'm desperate for it because I hate my full-time gig and I want to follow my dream, right? And so don't sell yourself short because all money is green. Do the best of your ability to find the right partner, because it really is a marriage. Like, you know, the idea of that marriage analogy, like she might be cute, but maybe she has no personality, right? Or he might be really handsome, but he's a jerk. And you just don't want to put yourself through that. So don't just go by what looks good on the surface or what meets an immediate need. Like, really think it through. It's really important.
And cash makes everyone look better, apparently.
Yeah, the money doesn't hurt.
That's exactly right. So, getting to agreement. I'm going to call it the Iowa approach is the first one. There's different ways you can approach deals, and you're going to approach it differently depending on your circumstances. There's I'm entering into this deal, and I'd say most of my, especially angel level investments, our approach would be we're trying to get a reasonable deal, right? Especially here in Iowa, like there's sort of some market standards. We're not going to start out by asking for the moon, knowing we're going to get negotiated up. Like, we're going to ask for what we want. If you're the company, you ask a little high. If you're the investor, you say, whoa, not worth quite that much, guys. You're going to negotiate your way down. But you can decide how you want to approach the negotiation. I have clients, most of my clients are on the reasonable deal approach. We want to start relatively close to what we think is a reasonable deal. We'll negotiate from there. We'll take into everyone's interest in account. Like, we're going to try to make a deal that works for everyone. I have a handful of clients that want the best deal possible, and they will fight tooth and nail for the last penny and spend way more than a penny to get that last penny, but they will. Know yourself and know the situation. There are times where that sort of worry and that sort of willingness to fight is important. But I find that's 10% of the time. The other 90%, it's not worth your time. You're going to get what you want usually by approaching it with a reasonable deal approach. Creating a sense of urgency. The fear of missing out can be strong, right? The FOMO is strong. That can really work. I don't see it as often as maybe most of my clients would like to see it, but it does happen. And when it does, just getting a little momentum can be big.
Yeah. So I don't know how, I know this, what I'm about to tell you is extremely not common, but along the way we raised a $1.1 million convertible note round, and we did it in like 48 hours exactly because of sort of this fear of missing out dynamic. And so it moved really fast, and I remember getting emails from investors that, like at the time when I said, hey, we're looking to raise this round, they were like, cool, do you have time next week for a call? And then like sending the update like, hey, we're over halfway there, like the same day as I said we're raising. And then the next day being like, all right, we're out, we're done. And then being like, what the heck just happened, So the idea of urgency, you have more. And so we talked earlier about like this idea of send out an email every other week or once a month that says, here's the update on the progress of the round. Like, to the best of your ability, any update, any reason, like you've got another investor, you're talking to a few more people, you need a few more introductions, those kinds of things help create that sense of urgency. And then when it comes down to it, like, usually, at least in my experience with the term sheets that I've seen, they want this no shop clause, and maybe that's on the next slide actually, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but.
Yeah, it's up there, but yeah.
Yeah, there's certain things like no shop clause, like, hey, if I give you this term sheet, you sign it, we're gonna do due diligence on you, then I don't want you to show anybody else this term sheet that might one-up me on the offer. And so do the best that you can to like get into dialogue with more than one investor so you can have multiple term sheets at the same time, to be able to pick which one you're actually gonna sign off and go through that process with.
Drew, I've got a question.
Yeah.
When you're getting ready to tee up a round, what can you legally say and when can you say it? Like, you can't just go out and announce on Facebook.
No, so your big risks are, and I'm sure, did you do a presentation earlier, Joe? On
No, I can handle it.
Well, but like usually it's general solicitation can come from. Almost everyone who's raising money in this room is going to raise it under the private offering exemptions. And there is an exception now, since the Jobs Act, for being able to generally solicit if you only sell to accredited investors. But our general advice is don't generally solicit. What I tell people is like, look, if you've got a potential investor that you know, that you think, so accredited, just think wealthy for purposes of this conversation, that you want to talk to about it, go have an initial conversation. This is my business. I'm thinking about raising some money. Is this a business that might interest you? You know, this is maybe some rough terms that you're thinking about. Like, that's not the kind of stuff that's generally going to get you in trouble. But by the time you get to the point where you're getting serious, and maybe you've outlined some of the general terms, then you're going to want some documentation that you share with them as well before you start having more in-depth conversations. But yeah, is that a fair summary?
Yeah, the only reason why you'd avoid the Facebook thing or whatever is because it forecloses options for you to structure around. You know, so I think I said a little bit before is that I don't like to have that decision made because we made a mistake. I like to make it because we've thought about it. And so when you make those solicitations, while because of the Jobs Act, you're allowed to do that under certain circumstances. If you do it and haven't really thought through how you're going to accomplish the offering, you might make it more difficult for yourself, kind of in the long run. I mean, I could give you a 45-minute, a 2.5 hour, or a 3-day version of that,
Yeah.
but that's kind of
Well, and the other piece is like, I think everyone thinks that that's like, oh, if I just post this on Facebook, like there's money that rains down from heaven because I've got 1,000 friends.
That would scare most people.
That's it, like,
Yeah.
I'll tell you,
You're
the
posting on
person,
Facebook.
yeah, if it's like, well, where'd you find the first 10
Really
investors?
scared.
Yeah, Facebook post. That's a little terrifying.
I think a more realistic recent version I saw was where somebody was raising capital and they were interviewed by media and they announced that they were opening funding. So I guess that would be.
You know,
you could in the olden days being several years ago.
still within our time.
Back when I was a kid. Yeah, you could not do that. Now you can do it, but you can only do it with if you're only offering or selling to accredited investors. And so, you know, I think you asked before about 504 and 506. You could not do that in a 504 offering, which has a lot more flexibility about who your investors are. And so that would be if you gave that interview, while it's not technically illegal, I could probably still structure an offering for you. You'll foreclose certain investors from participating. And especially you create a problem if you've already taken investors who didn't qualify, then we have to kind of unwind everything, and it's not.
I think in general, I would say to you, as someone that coaches people that's not an attorney, about the second thing I'm going to tell you after we talk about it is, I'm going to ask you, who is your attorney? And have you sat down and talked through how you're going to do it? Because you need to have a plan before you open your mouth to anybody. Okay, you just do. There was a gentleman that came to us and wanted to raise capital and went all the way through the pitch process. We got to the end and there was a bunch of us wanted to invest. He wasn't ready. It made him look not so good. And he had to rebuild a lot of trust afterwards because he really wasn't ready to say yes. So, and being ready to say yes, there's a lot, as you found out, there's a lot to that. So you're ready once you've thought it through and worked it out with your business advisors and your lawyer on how you're going to do it. Then you're probably ready. And that's not an ad for Brown Winnick and the lawyers. It's just, I'm telling you, like Kawasaki did this thing where he started a company, purposely got started a company to see how cheap he could start an online company. He did it for less than $13,000. And then he posted after he did this, and he sold it for a lot of money. Afterwards, he posts, this is how I spent the money, down to the penny. And over $5 grand was in legal fees, and people just piled on online. How stupid is that? how stupid is that? And his response was, no, you're the ones that are stupid. The only reason I could sell it for a lot of money is because I'd done the legal right. If I hadn't done that right, it would be worth zero. So I would just warn you that it's a penny wise found foolish kind of thing, or penny foolish found wise, whatever you want to say it. You want to spend this money up front and make sure you're not walking into a trap that makes your company worth nothing later.
Legal fees always cost more.
Sorry?
Legal fees are always more after.
Yeah. the
Costs
lawyers-
costs more to fix than it is
Costs
to
more
do
to fix
right.
it than to do it right in the first place.
And it's less expensive than people think. I can tell you stories all day.
I used to like to ask before I gave an estimate, I say, how much do you think it'll cost? And I can tell you 95% of the time I'm under that number.
And it's like the same thing, like, you know, people think like if they do some of their own plumbing and then call in a professional to come and finish it off, it also costs you more. It's the same concept.
So now I know how low to set my anchor?
Yeah.
Yep.
I just said 2,000, he said, yeah, sure.
Depends on, I said depends, that was my answer, yeah, sure.
That's hilarious.
He's gonna send me a legal Zoom. and-
Well, it depends, is the typical legal answer. So, we'll move on real quickly, because we do want to get you guys out of here. This one, this is I personally, if I were running a business, this would be my problem, negotiating against myself. It serves, I'm a nice guy, I don't necessarily like conflict, I like to make deals happen, right? It's like, well, that's not much, I'll just give that little bit, like, it's not that big of a deal, right? You do that 20 times, it becomes a big deal, right? So personally, you know, I like to think, you know your weaknesses, that's how you overcome them. Like, I know that, and then that's a piece that my nature personally is to do that. Now at work, gotta be aware of that. But I can't tell you how many clients I have where they will send something out, they won't hear anything for 2 days, and they'll call me back. Can we make the deal better? I'm scared they don't like it. Can you send it back out to them and like, let's lower the price. I'm like, guys, like, you know how hard it is to work with, like, they send it to their legal counsel, maybe already, if you're lucky, or it's sitting on the internal counsel's desk, like, you're gonna hear in a week, like, bring it down, like, they're gonna tell you what their problems are. And if they have issues, like, wait, and patience is tough, you wanna get it done, you need the cash, whatever it is, but try not to negotiate against yourself. And, because you find you give away a whole bunch of stuff someone else doesn't even ask you for. Go ahead, if you wanna,
Well, I think I'll just,
yeah, you something to say that.
yeah, dollars from poor, know what you're willing to give up, plays right into it. I think that my general rule of thumb is like, what's it gonna take to get to yes? Like, you do have to give up some things, you have to be aware of that. And what I typically look for is like, if they're asking for like 10 different things, is there one in here that's gonna hurt the most? And I'll try to negotiate against that one thing and say, all right, I'm good with the deal, except for this put thing over here, not okay with that. But if you can give me that one, then I'll be all right with, like, let's move forward and get married. And we had this investor in Chicago. I had mentioned some of the things about them earlier, but it felt like, I've never been in a Series A or Series B round at this point. This was like 2 years ago, and it felt like it was getting structured this way that, I don't know, Drew could speak more to the.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
terms that were
there was
included.
no investor protection that they did not ask for. Anti-dilution, board seats, veto over, like, very broad range of just anything you can imagine, they wanted, right? And it did. I told someone, it looks like a deal with 2 more zeros on it. I've done much larger deals, $15 million investments, and they didn't ask for this much control over what's going on. So that, that was one of those deals, like, were we desperate yet?
We
We could have used some cash to continue to finance this, right?
We had 2 weeks' flights.
Yeah, and we had a number of conversations. There were other term sheets. I think we had a deal that had already fallen through maybe before this that we were really excited about. And it was a bad value, but we thought we might have to take it. But we just couldn't swallow everything we were going to give up. And it was sort of that, make sure you know who you're going to marry. We didn't think they could bring the strategic value either. If they'd have been, I don't know, Trump Club's founder or something, well, maybe not, maybe they did too much, but like someone who like brought a ton of strategic, maybe we'd have considered it, but these guys didn't do it. And it's hard to walk away though, because I don't think we had a backup plan when we walked. There was no like, well, here's the next term sheet, I'm glad that came in, like.
Right.
So what made you happy after you said no and then somebody did come back?
Better value, better terms?
Bottle of wine that night.
I had somebody else that I was still talking to, but hadn't received a term sheet yet. And so these guys, one of the things that ended up breaking it was that they wanted me to relocate to Chicago, and that was just sort of a non-negotiable for me. I was talking to Casey earlier, and he's like, he was up here with Agrestein, but he's like, the best way to like get a cohesive agreement is to let the VC negotiate with your spouse. There's actually some truth to that, and there's always the conversation that I'm having to have with my wife about what are we willing to do, or how is this going to impact us as a family. And there's been more than once where my wife has gone and she's gone to work or working a night shift or what have you, just to make certain ends meet. It will absolutely impact your spouse. So when they wanted us to move to Chicago, that was a deal breaker. But then I, took a road trip to go see the other investor face to face and say, what's it going to take to do it? And we did it. Unfortunately, it was mentioned earlier, like, get as simple as a term sheet as you can, especially early on, because a lot of it's going to get negotiated out anyways later on down the road. And that's what we were able to land on, is all common stock. I mean, it was very straightforward. Even today, I showed to people as we progress through rounds, and their jaw just sort of hits the floor because they're amazed at how simple this particular term sheet is. So I lucked out there.
Yeah.
Was that investor local then, or the?
He wasn't. No, he was Wisconsin. My accelerator was in Wisconsin, so it sort of opened up a number of doors for me in that regard.
And what Darren said ties in nicely. My feeling with most of these rounds, it's not always true, but whatever you give the round you're currently in for rights, protections, participation rights, anti-dilution board seat. If I give the guy who puts in 200,000 board seat, when I do my next round for $1 million, what is that? That's the baseline now. They're definitely going to want one board seat. I had one guy tell me, well, I just do the math. $1 million divided by 200,000, I get 5. I said, I just laughed. But I think he was joking, I think. But you can imagine, whatever you give away the first time, you're going to give away again. Absent special circumstances, if things are really blowing up, you have some more leeway. But usually, you need the cash. You're still trying to grow. So I try not to give as much away up front. And in my mind, there's no hard and fast rule, but I have rough numbers in my head. In general, I'm not going to give a board seat away for less than $500,000. I've had clients do it, but for me, 50,000, not going to do it. It better have at least 6 digits, and I want it to be mid 6 digits, because again, that's a big authority. That means you're going to deal with this person. That's a real marriage. You're going to see that person and deal with that person a lot. You're giving them a lot of authority. What do they have to pay you to get that? Because a lot of people, you just miss that. It doesn't seem that, well, it's not ownership. Well, that has real value, and we should put value on it. The legalities, there's a lot of pieces in term sheets. I'm sure you guys have talked about this all day. Sadly, I wasn't able to make it most of the day, but we're talking about NDAs. Has anyone talked about confidentiality agreements?
Yep.
Yeah. So those are good. By the time you get a lot of this done, you're going to have an NDA before you let the investor start doing due diligence. Obviously there'll be a term sheet, LOIs. Darren mentioned the no shop provisions. These are very common. They're reasonable if you've got a term sheet, in my opinion, but you want a reasonable length of one. But the basic idea being, hey, we've got a rough economic deal, agreed. Before we go and fly 2 people out maybe to do their due diligence and dig through all the financials and call our accountants and lawyers to look over this stuff, we want to make sure that you don't just turn around and say, oh, sorry guys, we changed our mind tomorrow. We get a few months to do our work, and we're gonna make that commitment. So that's not uncommon, but you don't want one that lasts 12 months. You don't want to lock yourself down too long. So find a reasonable. I don't think that's an unreasonable provision to have in, but just know that you want it to be in reasonable scope and duration, I'd say. And lastly, we've done this with all of them. You guys have talked a lot about the term sheets, right? If you've seen the formal legal docs on this, they're not necessarily completely insane, but that stack is real. There are a number of the documents. You usually got your modifying organizational documents. You've got a purchase or subscription agreement. You've got some disclosure documents, probably some respecters. There's a stack there, and that is it's meaty, right? Meaty stacks of paper that a lawyer creates for you should equate to dollars in your head. That's expensive. So don't do that until you have the economics done. If you can't agree on price, why draft all that stuff? If you can't agree on, so I encourage people, get that term sheet first. After you've got the general deal agreed, now it's time to start doing the heavy lifting of the details of the formal docs.
I got a big argument with the CEO recently about this. Chicken and the egg, offering for sale stock that you don't actually have authorized by your shareholders in your articles of organization. If the stock isn't authorized, can you still offer it for sale? Because it hasn't been authorized by my existing shareholders.
Yeah, so it depends. So like, the authorized shares are a particular term, right? So with corporations particularly, you'll often see that they're authorized to issue 1 million shares, right? And what we find is, unless lawyers did it, if they did it themselves, they often have issued all 1 million shares to the founder. The founder owns 100%, 1 million shares. Well, the number of authorized shares is the max number that company can ever issue, absent amending their articles of incorporation. I don't think it's probably a good practice to go and offer shares that are not authorized in general. With that said, if it's a sole owner raising money or a founder, or you can amend the articles with a 75% vote and you own 80%. We know we're going to be able to fix that problem. So usually you can start moving ahead at least somewhat. But yeah, that's a rookie mistake. That's actually more expensive. Not super expensive to fix, but like you're going to have to fix that, and you wouldn't have had to if you called someone up front.
So the bottom line is authorizing the
Yeah.
number of shares that you're offering for sale should be done
Before you sell them, at least. And you can start talking about selling them, but before you're going to start doing some. I had a client come in once and they'd issued like 4 times as many shares as they had authorized. Like, was there any real big consequence for that? No, we fixed it. We sort of cured the defect. But you don't want to be the one who's trying to sell your company later, and in due diligence, that their lawyers come in and they go to their client and they say, you're buying these guys, but they're a bunch of clowns over there. Like, serious. Like, that is when I see that during due diligence, it's like, that is amateur hour. Right? That sounds bad, but I pay less for amateur hour because I don't know what else they're not paying attention to. And it's not a hard thing to get right. That sounds sort of condescending, but we've all been there, right? Like when you work with someone who's not good at details, you worry about the other details they're not paying attention to. And that's one of those kinds of things that comes up. That's what we got. Like, we got stories, questions. Barry and I, together, we've been through this a few times.
Great.
Thank you guys.
Thanks, guys.
We'll be around.
Yeah, we'll be around after, so if you want to talk, thank you.
Okay.
Please, you're up.
All right, back in front.
That's right. Close her out.